Well, thank you again for having me. It's been once a year now for 4 years because my oldest daughter is a student at the University of Texas. And so I told Luke 4 years ago, I'm the easiest ask in the world to get here, but I don't know what's gonna happen next year. So we're on our last trip around the 40 acres unless she stays here for graduate school, but it's been great that you all have welcomed me. Luke contacted me well before his sabbatical and he said, what's your best traveling sermon? And I don't know if you know this, but preachers tend to have a traveling sermon, which they put all of their best stories in so that they can fool people around the world that they're actually that good all the time. And I said, well, I don't really have a traveling sermon right now, but I do have one that I really like, but the problem with it is this: it's not that good. And I really like it, but not everybody really likes it. But I'm gonna do it anyway, and you can judge for yourselves. And clearly, if you hate it, you will be like most people, and that will not dissuade me from saying it over and over and over again. So you're free to make your own decisions, your own judgments. We're gonna spend some time in John 12 a little bit later. But I wanted to talk to you about a movie that I saw a couple of years ago that is actually a pretty terrible movie. One Saturday morning, I was watching a television show on Netflix, and my wife Rochelle came in and started watching it with me. And it's a whole series. And this should be a good thing because she started to get into it. And some of you have had this experience where you start watching a series, then your partner comes in and they kind of get into it, but then you've done that enough where you're like, oh crap. Because now I can only watch it when they're here. And so I started, she had to go and do something with one of our girls, and I said, I'm gonna just watch another movie. So I started watching this movie, The Age of Adeline. And The Age of Adeline tells a story of a woman named Adeline who was the first baby born on New Year's Day in 1908. And you fast forward in her life, she grows up, she gets married to a man, they have a child, but she is widowed in a construction accident when he dies in the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge in 1937. And 10 months later, Adeline is driving her car on a dark, rainy, cold night along a windy street, and she slides off the road and goes into a ravine, and she dies. But at the moment of her death, there's a lightning strike, then lightning hits the water and revives her. And after that, Adeline, at 29 years old, never ages. She never wrinkles. She doesn't get older. And some of us really like the idea of being 29 forever. Some of you have been lying about how long you've been 29. And that's why we do all the things that we do. That's why we dye our hair and we work out and the wrinkle creams, because everybody wants to be 29 forever. The problem with Adeline is that she's not getting any older, but everybody else in her world is. Her daughter gets older, her friends get older, and she never does. And her problem is that she can't explain this to anyone. I mean, who would understand why she doesn't get any older? She doesn't even understand why she doesn't get older. And what she's supposed to do when people start asking questions about why she doesn't get any older at all. And not just friends and relatives and the people at work, but if you knew someone, if we knew someone that was 29 forever, well, there would be just a line of scientists, experimenters. They want to capture her DNA. Because if you could bottle and sell something that kept people 29 forever, you would be a trillionaire. And so what she has to do with her adulthood is move from place to place. And whenever anyone gets suspicious, she's got to move on. And so that's what she does. She lives in different places all over the world. And she experiences life. She learns new languages and new skills. And she does all of this. And that's her normal life, moving from one place to another place to another place. And all of this works out for decades until she meets a man named Ellis. And when she meets Ellis, Adeline tells Ellis that her name is Jenny. And Jenny and Ellis fall in love. And they do all the stuff in the movies where people fall in love. And it's one of those guys, right? She's been 29 for a very long time, but he's tall and good looking and wealthy and sophisticated and smooth. And I'm watching this movie thinking, I might fall in love with him. Well, as they fall in love, Ellis decides that he wants Jenny to meet his parents. And so he invites her for a weekend away at a private island where his parents live. See, you would marry him too. And as they walk into the house for the first time, Ellis's dad is standing at the far end of the hallway. And he turns and he sees Jenny for the first time. And he looks at her and says, Adeline. Well, it turns out that 40 years ago, Ellis's dad fell in love with Adeline while they were living in London. And when she started getting a whiff that he was going to ask her to marry him, she bolted. And so Jenny says, oh yes, the woman that you remember as Adeline, that was my mother. She died a couple of years ago, but it just starts bothering him. This guy, this dad, played by Harrison Ford, so many of you would marry both of them. And he starts to put it all together. And he finally confronts her with all of these old pictures. And she admits that she is Adeline. She can't explain it. And she didn't want to hurt Ellis. She didn't want to hurt his son. So she writes Ellis a note and she leaves, runs out of the house. Not long after that, Ellis returns home. He asks, where's Jenny? Dad says, she's gone. He hands him their note and he reads the note. And he says, what happened? And Ellis runs out the door and his dad stops him. And he says, Ellis, she can't. She can't what? She can't change. And the reason that Adeline can't change is that she can't die. Adeline can't change and she can't die. And what that has meant from the time that this happened and she couldn't explain it to family or friends or people she fell in love with, she can't change, she can't die, she can't be loved. Now that's the whole sermon, but I'm going to talk for a little bit more, just so you feel like you got your money's worth. I want us just to spend some time thinking together about how people change. And have you ever considered the possibility that it's your ability to die, literally, figuratively, your ability to change, to connect, to grow. And without death and without dying, we would become like Adeline, unable to know or be known, to love and to be loved well. So as you know, I have two daughters. And yeah, one is a senior here at UT and the other is a freshman at Abilene Christian. and they make me think about dying all the time. And there's a lot that's changed. Like this past summer, I celebrated my 51st birthday. And my wife and I will sit at home and we'll watch a movie. And we were watching a movie a couple of months ago, and I leaned over and looked at her and said, you know, this whole movie with all of these actors that we remember from when we were kids, everyone in this movie is dead. Our moms call and they tell us about adults that we admired when we were young, who are dead or dying. And then there are so many other kinds of deaths. I used to run. We were talking about this morning, but about 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with pretty severe arthritis in both my feet and both my hands, and it's only going to get worse. When we were living just north of here in Temple, every Thursday morning, I would go and lead a devotional at a daycare, a senior daycare. And so it was all geriatric people brought in by their caregivers, and they would sit them in rows, and they would say the Pledge of Allegiance, and they would do little hand gestures, and they would have a Bible lesson and have manipulatables. It was like it was kindergarten. And sitting there every week, I thought there was a time in every one of these people's lives where they were vibrant and alive, when they were the center of somebody's world. And now they're here in this place that we will all be, having to have someone read them a story. Life is a series of deaths of all kinds and of all types, big and small. And one of my favorite theologians says that life is a series of surrenders. And maybe this is a way to think about it. Every time you love someone, there is something you surrender. And when you fall in love with a partner or a spouse, you surrender the ability to just do things on your own, to spend money the way that you want to go and be wherever you want to be all of the time, doing whatever you want. When you have children, you really surrender. Like, I have 2 daughters. There are a lot of surrenders, mostly money, but there are a lot of surrenders. And in the end, we will all pass through our final surrender. And the question is never whether or not life will make us surrender. It's whether we'll receive it. And in the Christian tradition, the way that I learned about surrender and to live well in the midst of surrender is what some call the Paschal mystery. And I read a book by a Catholic priest named Ronald Rolheiser, and he introduced me to this idea of the Paschal mystery, and this is what he says. He says, the Paschal mystery is a process of transformation within which we are given both new life and new spirit. It begins with suffering and death, moves on to the reception of new life. Spend some time grieving the old and adjusting to the new, and finally, only after the old life has been truly let go of is new spirit given for the life we are already living. And the Paschal mystery says that this is a pattern for all of life. And since I didn't grow up in a tradition that had very much to do with the Christian calendar or any of the liturgical calendar, I totally missed this. But this is not just one area of your life, that you could be experiencing this process, this transformation of dying and rising again in multiple areas of life. And you can be in one area at home or with your family and someplace completely different in your health or with your children. And so this is the way the Paschal mystery works. It begins with Good Friday, that there is a loss of life, a real death that we experience. And all of us, all you have to do is live long enough, And you will experience a real death, both the physical death of people that you love or the death of a dream, something you wanted, something you tried, the thing that you didn't get, maybe even after you deserved it, but it's a real loss. And that period, after that is Easter Sunday, where there is a reception of new life. That there is something beyond this point, that life has to go on. And even when new life isn't a new kind of life that we would enjoy, it's still new. And part of the Paschal mystery is the 40 days. And this is a time for readjustment to the new and for grieving the old. And the grieving is important because we do live in a culture and a society and oftentimes in a church that wants to punish us for simply grieving the very real thing that we lost, or wants us to move past it as quickly as we can because the people who have to watch us grieving don't have the mental, emotional, and spiritual capacity to watch it. And so they want us to push past it so they don't have to deal with it. It's a refusal to cling comes in the ascension. Letting go of the old. And not just letting go of it, but letting it bless you. The refusal to cling, to hold on. And then there's Pentecost, the reception of new spirit for the new life that you are already living. Like, this is the journey of life. And regardless of how you came in today, one thing I can tell you about you, that you are somewhere in this process right now. And maybe even multiple places in this process right now. And I remember experiencing this those 4 years ago when Malia came to school here, and I was grieving the idea that we really had worked for her to be able to go to the place that she wanted to for school. And it wasn't going to be terribly far away, but it did mean renegotiating how we were as a family. The version of our family was going away. And we would have to do something new. We would have to look and feel new. And I was speaking someplace, and she came and arrived. It was in that same year. And she had been busy all day and was going to meet me at the place. And when I saw her, I realized, like, this was the same daughter that I had held as a baby, but this was a completely new person. Because she had to become something new, and we had to become something new. Just this past Easter, I was invited to come on a local radio show in Houston to talk about the Paschal Mystery. And this show has 3 hosts, and I know one of the hosts pretty well, and one of the hosts did not want me on the show at all. And they did not want a preacher type coming on the show to talk about religious stuff because it's not a religious show. And so whatever happened. I made it on the show. We're talking about all of this. And he asked me to explain it. And so here's what I knew about him. That for over 20 years, he had been a local weatherman. And that just 8 months before, he had been sort of pushed out of his job. And I knew that that was painful for him. But I also knew that he was an adoptive father, and that just a few years ago, he had a child leave. And so after I talked about all of the Good Friday and Easter stuff, he asked me, is any of this good for non-Christians? And so I told him what I just told you, these 5 movements of Paschal mystery. And he didn't cry, but he got a little bit teary. And when the interview was over, he goes, and I got word later on that the studio was inundated with email and phone calls from people who claim to not be Christians, about how meaningful that was, and they finally understood Christianity and life and Easter. Surrendering well is the process of dying, grieving, letting go, and embracing something new. And you already know this because you don't have to look too hard for people who are clinging. Like, imagine this for those of you who have sent off a child either into the military or to college or into the workforce. You've seen those families that say, well, you're going to leave this house and I'm only going to pay for this, that, and the other, and you're going to have to go to this place and you have to do what I did and you have to go into the thing that I say that you have to go into. We have one of our mothers who has two incredibly successful young daughters, and she told me once that I decided what career they were going to go into. It's clinging, which is the refusal to embrace new life, getting stuck. And getting stuck means that we fail to grow, we fail to deepen. Unless we learn to die, we cling. So at the same time that I was exploring the Paschal mystery, I also read Bono's biography called Surrender. And he goes through 40 songs in 40 years, and he tells the story of those songs and what was going on in their life. And one of the songs that caught my attention is about his relationship with a man named Michael Hutchence. And so Bono's the lead singer of U2, for those of you who are under 40. Bono says that he and his wife, Allie, had a great relationship, a great friendship with Michael Hutchence, who was the lead singer of INXS, and his partner, Helena. But things began to devolve because Bono and Allie weren't thrilled with some of the choices that Michael and Helena were making, and he said their friendship ended badly, and they didn't talk. Well, shortly after that, Michael started having trouble with Helena. They separated. She wasn't allowing him to see their kids. And so those of you who remember that time and remember that band, remember that one Sunday morning, it was reported that Michael Hutchence had died by suicide while in Australia. And in the book, Bono talks about how angry he was at Michael, and he wrote a song called Stuck in a Moment That You Can't Get Out Of. And he's very clear in the book that the song's not fair. It's a one-sided argument. It's just his expression of what he was feeling at the time. But I was just struck with these lyrics. He says, you've got to get yourself together. You've got stuck in a moment, and now you can't get out of it. Don't say that later will be better. Now you're stuck in a moment, and you can't get out of it. And Bono's warning us of the same thing that the Paschal mystery is trying to teach us, that unless we learn to step into the rhythms of surrender, our choices are to surrender to Paschal death, to grow, or to get stuck. And my family and Bono are just like snapshots of a much more profound teaching, something that happens to everyone. Learn to surrender to the rhythms of life or get stuck. So in John 12, we've been given a succession of 4 stories in a row that are the rhythms of life. In the first story, Mary anoints Jesus' feet. That's a real up time for Jesus. That is her announcing to the world, at least everybody who was present at the time, that Jesus is the king, the one true anointed king. And then the next story right after that is the plot to kill Lazarus. That's a real down time. There are folks hunting down disciples of Jesus, killing them. And the third story is Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. That's another up time. And then we get to this story starting in verse 20. Among the crowds traveling to Jerusalem were Greeks seeking to follow God and worship at the great feast. Some of them came to Philip with an important request. The Greeks say to Philip, "Sir, we are hoping to meet Jesus." Philip, a disciple from the Galilean village of Bethsaida, told Andrew that these Greeks wanted to see Jesus. Together, Andrew and Philip approached Jesus to inform him about the request. Jesus tells them, "The time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you the truth, unless a grain of wheat is planted in the ground and dies, it remains a solitary seed. But when it is planted, it produces in its death, a great harvest. The one who loves his life will lose it, and the one who despises it in this world will have life forevermore. Anyone who serves me must follow my path. Anyone who serves me will want to be where I am, and he will be honored by the Father. My spirit is low and unsettled. How can I ask the Father to save me from this hour? This hour is the purpose for which I have come into the world. But what I can say is this: Father, glorify your name." People, churches, families, to grow, to deepen, to do anything meaningful, we all have to do the one thing we don't want to do. We all have to surrender. We have to die to the gifts that God has given in order for new life and new gifts to arise. Jesus is saying, in order to be glorified, he must die. But in that death will bear great fruit. So I told you that this past summer, I turned 51, which at that moment you should have thought, wow, how is that possible? And I think I've mentioned before when I've been here that in 2023, my older brother Richard died. And he was 52 at the time. And my birthday has always been mixed because while my birthday is June 15th, my brother's birthday is June 18th, and because my dad is cheap, he always wanted to combine parties. So if we had birthday parties, they were always together. And like some of you know, the sting of grief, both the fresh kind and the kind that is so frequent a visitor to you that it has built its own room in your heart. And my brother and I weren't close as boys. And it was in our adulthood that we grew closer to one another. And while nobody wants to sit at a funeral, when I was at his funeral, I was genuinely amazed by his life. My brother got married late, so he and his wife didn't have any children, so they dedicated a lot of time to their church. And his church was a satellite campus of another church, so they started working in schools, and so he would get there at 5 o'clock in the morning to help the band and the musicians set up all the audio and chairs, and he was one of the sound guys and did that forever until his wife got tired of him being gone all day Sunday because with multiple services, he was getting there at 5 and not getting home after they broke everything down till 2 or 3. And so they decided that they would serve as greeters instead. Much shorter window of time. The next time folks are up here begging you to volunteer, go with greeting. And my brother's just like that. I'm extraordinarily introverted. He's incredibly extroverted. He's never met a stranger. He talks to everyone. And so he made a great greeter. And so when he passed away, my sister-in-law had him cremated, and she just kind of kept his ashes at the house. But 2 months ago, the church where they have worshiped, that was meeting in a school, finally broke ground on their new building. And so they called my sister-in-law, and they said, "Do you have any of Richard's ashes?" And she did, because I didn't want any. And so as they broke ground and the foundation was being laid, they took some of his ashes and they spread them in the foundation at the front door. So you can never go to church there without getting past my brother. Jesus is teaching us that in order for God to do the next beautiful and powerful thing, some part of your life, maybe all of your life, has to be surrendered. It has to die. And I don't know what that is for you. Maybe it's an old way of relating to a partner or a former partner or a child or a parent. Or maybe it's a belief or a thought about yourself that someone handed you years and years and years ago and you are still holding on to. Like maybe for you, it's the death of your youth. Maybe it's the idea that the body you have now should be the same body it was 10 years ago. Maybe it's the death of a dream that's never going to happen. You are just never going to play pro baseball. And all of us resist our surrenders. But in that resistance to surrenders, we are also resisting the grand thing that God wants to do next. The option that Jesus gives is to cling to the old or surrender to what God is doing. And what if your greatest defense against what God wants to do in your life is clinging to the last move of God in your life? It's when a seed falls to the ground and dies that it produces much fruit. So how do we surrender? First of all, we have to name our deaths. Now, you really have suffered great deaths in life. And some of them were natural and good, like someone moving on to their next phase in life. Some of them are literal deaths. Some of them are deaths of what you thought your life would be or turn out, whatever it is. Just name it. And then when you name it, you begin to deal with it, to not suppress it. But after you've named your deaths, you have to claim your births. Like, what are the good, beautiful, and powerful things that God is doing in your life? What has God surrounded you with? What do you have right now? And then you grieve what you have lost and adjust to a new reality. And the grieving is important. And for certain people and for certain aspects of your life, the grieving never stops. Grief never goes away. It only becomes more familiar. And then do not cling to the old. Let it ascend and give you a blessing. And then 5, accept the spirit of the life you are, in fact, living. That this is the place where you are with God. To live as God intended you to live, to be the blessing God intended you to be. To bear much fruit right here, right now, which is the gift that you have, is right now. And Jesus goes to the cross, as John tells us. He doesn't want to, but he's willing to. and me and you and the person to your right and your left. We are the fruit. Westover, let me pray for you. God, help us to receive new life and new vision for who you are and what you're doing. That even in the deepest griefs that we feel and know and are very real, to trust that you are with us, and you love us and are guiding us. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.